Okay. With 13, should we start, Dave? There's very few parishes online at the moment.
Yeah, I know Ganita's coming, but she's had to go out and do a visit with the Ukrainian host family, so she will be turning up in the next 20 minutes or so.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to Bathavon Forum. Hopefully one or two more will be turning up. Historically, we've had on average 11, 12 PCs, parish councils represented. So hopefully it's just a matter of people enjoying a rare day of summer and are out at the local hostelry, who knows. On the agenda today, we're looking through the Climate and Nature group. We're welcoming Louise Morris in her new role, taking an update on the Ukrainian refugees. And thank you very much, Simon Debert, for joining us. Have I got your name right? Is it Simon or Simone?
I don't mind either, whatever's easiest. I'm normally Simon or Sim to my two colleagues, but Simon is fine. Simon is fine, whatever's easiest.
I've seen your name on many occasions, but it's the first time we met. Welcome.
Hello, John.
Hello. Very much looking forward to the planning policy section, and then a tidy up on looking forwards. Without going on, if I can hand over to Louise, who is our new head of green transformation, for an introduction on her and her new role. Louise, over to you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. So I suppose, first of all, thank you for inviting me. That's appreciated. And also thank you, John, for your time a couple of weeks ago, showing me around. That was really appreciated as well, and just getting the opportunity to listen to some of the issues in the Bathavon Forum area. So my name's Louise Morris, and I joined Bath North East Somerset Unitary Authority approximately 7 weeks ago, and I head up a new service. It's the Green Transformation Service, which is bringing together nature and climate change. So you may or may not be aware that the council declared nature and climate change emergencies. So that's basically my day job. In addition to that job, there are 5 heads of service who have a responsibility for different area forums. And the area forum where I am the senior point of contact is your forum, the Bathavon Forum. So what I'd like to do is just spend a couple of minutes talking about what is this place-based working approach. Also just highlight a few issues which I think, from talking to John, looking at an issues log, might be of interest or relevant. And I suppose most importantly, it's about listening to people who have given their time to be here today to maybe raise any issues which are, particularly pertinent to the Bathavon area. So the map here shows how the jurisdiction, Bath North East Somerset, has been, I suppose, divvied up, different areas. Bathavon, obviously, is the area, you're very familiar with all of this, is obviously the area around Bath, and I'm taking responsibility for that. And each one of them has got a senior lead, and the senior leads are just listed there on the right hand side. And Sim not only is our head of planning, but also has a place responsibility for the Somer Valley as well. So what's the purpose of this place based approach? I suppose the purpose of it is to make sure that places have a senior person in the authority who understands priorities, can work across the council, can listen, understand priorities, and try and link things up and make it easier for people to engage with the authority from the parishes in the area. So it's about understanding what needs are in a place, and obviously I work closely with John on trying to understand those issues and make sure when opportunities arise that we link in and get the best for this place, this Bathavon place. So if I'm being completely honest, I think that we just need to appreciate that this place-based way of working, it's not revolutionary, it's not rocket science, but what we're trying to do is get a better sort of communication with places, and that's part of me being here today. So so I think it's important to understand, and this is what I need to do, is understand what the key issues are in the area, and John and I started that conversation. It's important for me to listen and try and understand what the priorities are. So I'm really keen to get some, conversations going with different parishes. So I've tried to identify in this very short presentation some of the issues which people here might be interested in. I don't know if they're the right ones, but sort of intuitively, it feels like people might be interested in them. And then it'll be really great just to have a bit of time and space just to maybe talk some of those things through. So if we just go on to the next slide, is that okay? Yeah, so some of the projects that people might be interested in are, there's a couple of key nature-based projects. One of them is the Bathscape work that's going on. So this is a heritage lottery funded project that's looking to restore certain habitats. It's looking to engage with people across the area. So it's a landscape-based initiative, and the landscape being the bowl within which Bath sits in, if you're thinking about the geography of the area. And it's trying to engage more people in that, as well as restoring nature. People may also be familiar with the Bath River line. There's a 10-kilometre linear park that goes from Newbridge to Bath Easton, and that's with funding from the West of England Combined Authority, so the regional entity. And that's looking also at restoring habitat, but also helping and encouraging and improving access to the river line as well. Is it all right to go on to the next slide? Oh, thank you. So the reason I just put this in is, so this isn't my area of expertise, but we work closely with transport colleagues. And there's just something, again, looking at the issues log, it felt as if nature, climate and transport and planning were sort of reoccurring themes. So I thought people might be interested in this. So the local planning, the planning authority is the West of England Combined Authority, and they've been asked by government to produce the next integrated, the next joint local transport plan. And I suppose from a sort of a professional and self-interest sort of perspective, the key thing for me there is about thinking about carbon, is thinking about climate change, and also thinking about how people, especially in rural communities, need to access services, need to access roads, and need to make sure that obviously transport is flowing. But the key thing there is there are things which the authority does, Bath and North East Somerset, and has responsibility for, and there's also things which the regional entity, the West of England Combined Authority, have responsibility for, but we as an authority obviously have a very important role to play in that. So I suppose this is watch the space consultation next year, and we obviously all need to be engaged in that, because it'll have a real impact on the lives of people within Bath and North East Somerset. Are we right to move on to the next slide? Yeah, so I don't want to steal Sim's thunder, but obviously if we're talking about place and we're talking about what's spatially, significant, relevant to people in the Bathavon Forum, obviously the local plan and the decisions that come from that is obviously of relevance and I'm assuming of interest. So at the moment there's a local plan partial update going on, and that's with the planning inspector at the moment at examination. And then to follow after that, there will be a more a review of the plan in its entirety, and that will follow on from this the partial update that's going on. But obviously there's a slot on the agenda later just to sort of talk about planning in more detail. So I think I had like 5-10 minutes just to sort of like give an overview of what the role is and some of the issues that might be of interest. I suppose now, I mean, it'd be really nice to speak with people from the parishes and get an idea of what priorities might be or key interest areas. So yeah, if anybody's got any sort of questions or issues, it'd be really nice to hear them. And I think we've got a few minutes to do that, have we?
Yes, that's fine. Doug, you're on mute.
Hi, Doug.
Sorry, good evening, everyone. I'm having to do this on my phone because I couldn't find a link that I could use my laptop with, so everything's slightly on the small side. Thanks very much for the presentation. I guess there are a number of issues really that spin out of this. We've all been used to liaising with our local councillors, and I had an email from somebody the other day saying they were now the local lead for somebody or other else. Aren't we running the risk of having too many people that we're meant to be linking through and losing the plot?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so I think there's always a risk of that. So I suppose this role doesn't preclude or doesn't mean that other conversations can't go on at all. And obviously there are times when engaging directly with relevant officers who are doing legwork on certain projects, for example, is really, really important. And obviously we all know the importance of engaging directly with councillors as well. I think what my role is trying to establish is that with all of that stuff going on, do you need help and assistance in making the voice clearer, making the voice louder, making it more joined up? So I suppose there needs to be value added, doesn't there, in the role that I'm doing? And yeah, so I think we have to suck it and see to a certain extent.
And I'm sure everybody's happy to do that. I just think that I can now think of 3 or 4 different areas of people who are adding value to this wonderful clean air and greening and everything else that everybody's doing.
Yeah.
And I think we just run the risk of, we need to understand where the goals are and then having some clear direction to achieve the goals. And I'm thinking of, you're talking about greening and all the rest of it. How is that all going to fit in with the National Trust's recent purchase of Bathavon Meadows, and those sort of initiatives? I should probably say I've got a vested interest in, as much as I am also the chair of the Environs Group of the Preservation Trust. And one of my passions is the groups of parishes around Bath, because this bowl, this World Heritage City that we have, sits within the World Heritage Site, and how we manage that going forward will either add and support the clean air zone, or it could detract, depending on whether we start the link between Bath and Bristol from Queen Square, or whether it's started. So huge number of issues. I think, please, if all I can ask is that we have some very clear lines of responsibility, so we know who to talk to and when.
Yeah, no, that's a very reasonable ask. So I suppose there are 2 things in my head. It just so happens that my job is head of green transformation, and then in addition having this place responsibility. And I think part of the reason for me doing this job is it was felt that Bathavon Forum has a lot of interest in issues to do with climate, clean air zone, nature. So hopefully that'll pay dividends. Yeah, but again, I suppose just to emphasise, I don't want this to preclude any other conversations. You know, it's not a unique channel for communication. I'm just hoping that it will help and make communications better, and hopefully, you know, lead to better outcomes ultimately.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Sarah.
Hello. As I think probably the only one of the local ward councillors on the call, I just wanted to respond to Doug's point as well, and to say that as ward councillors, I don't think we see any contradiction. I mean, anyone can always contact their ward councillor and will always be there. And we've actually asked the officers to create this structure whereby they not only have their line of management within the council, the teams that they directly manage, but also each one of those senior team has an overview of a geographical area. And the reason we are doing that is to try to make it more joined up, to make sure that there's someone on the employed staff of the council who has an overview of all the projects that are happening in one particular geographical area, so we don't get conflict between, you know, what the regeneration team are doing and the highways team and the planning, you know, what, I don't know, some other team, you know, so the green transformation team or whatever. But there are different teams in the council, and one of the things we've been working on for the last 3 years is to get better integration between them, and we see this as one route to doing that. But we'll find out whether it works. We'll try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll try something else.
That's great.
Ward councillors will always be there, and you can always contact them in the first instance.
Yeah, and that's great. Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate that explanation. So I think there's something about this is a new model. Again, it's not rocket science, it's not revolutionary, but there's something about parishes and this forum, maybe both process, product and outcome. If we think about what works for this place, it might not be the same as what works for, you know, Bath Town Centre or Chew or the Summer Valley. So we need to, you know, make this work for us, I suppose. And I think that'll just develop over time. Thank you. Oh, I think you're on mute, John.
Oh, classic. David Orme.
Yes, thanks, John. Speaking for Dunkerton and Sunday Parish Council and the Baines Rural Transport Group that was set up 2 or 3 years ago, we very much welcome this change. That it could make some big differences. But I would echo Doug's point. The biggest and most immediate value that can be brought to the conversation is to clarify the structure of what's going on and to join the moving parts better soon, so that we understand how things are going to be done over the next couple of years. And I'll put an example on the table that I'm happy to talk about offline or later on. Very recently, the authority created the Journey to Net Zero Transport Forum. This clearly relates to the slide you just showed about JLTP and stuff. Again, on face of it, that's good news, but it happened a few weeks ago, since which time we've heard or seen nothing. So there is these loose ends and unconnected entities all doing good stuff, and it will help us tremendously if we better understand together how they are going to work over the next few months and years to meet this 2030 target. So we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions, points to raise, Sarah?
It was just a response to Dave's point. Thank you, Dave. Well, maybe what we need to do is to produce some sort of a graphic that has, you know, has pictures of the various groups and routes in, so that you can, you know, see how they relate to one another. But in terms of that Journey to Net Zero Forum, I apologise if you haven't heard anything. I understood that questionnaires were going to go out to those who attended and to those who couldn't attend ahead of pulling together an agenda for the next one. So I apologise if that hasn't happened, and we'll chase that up. But the purpose of that forum is to bring together anyone who's on it, who sort of heads up a campaigning group in the area of transport, again, so that we can make sure that the different, any different sets of needs, different channels of work that are going on in the transport arena are kind of better coordinated, and the links and impacts of one on the other are made.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's much appreciated. If that's all the questions, to move on rapidly through the agenda. Climate and Nature Group update. You'll have all received a draft paper that's put together by Richard Mann on nature recovery. What we've also done since the last meeting is set up, for want of a phrase, BCNG, Bathavon Climate and Nature Group, set up a steering group. We've met a couple of times, we've agreed a way of working, how we'll go about this. We've defined our subgroups, put out a call to all the parish councils for members, for people to join the groups with their preferred areas of interest. And the sum total of the responses that have been received have been 0. There's no way of sugarcoating this. The interesting part is there was a 100% agreement within the Bathavon Forum parish councils that we need to do something. We need to set up action groups. We need to take this forwards. So is this a case that no one's interested? I don't think so. I think we're just perhaps not going about it the right way. It's a possibility. We've now got Louise in role. We've got Michaela to liaise individually with, well, there's 21 parish councils in Bathavon area, and overall, I've forgotten the exact number, 50, 60 odd, maybe 70, honestly don't know, sorry. But the point is, I believe the forum has a role to play here that we've got to cut out for ourselves. So how can we get people engaged? One of the thoughts has been is, rather than starting on scratch, let's share what's going on already across the different parishes. So we can then have a face-to-face meeting, because it has to be for the person-to-person interaction. We're doing this, we're doing that. So we can begin to share best practice. And we can help each other, and we can build up a groups that way in a positive manner, from people actually starting to do things or being interested in doing things, and can see directly from others how things are being done. So that's a suggestion I'd like to put to the floor. I can't think of another way forwards, and if anyone has got an alternative suggestion, I would be so gratefully received. Because to be honest, we're going through a situation that we've never gone through before. Something like the climate emergency has not happened. So how do we address this? We don't know. We're going to take false turns. That's fine. What's the right turn we need make? So if there are any views, if you could please speak up now. I'm quite tempted to go forward saying, if there are no voices of dissent, then we'll take it forward. Rachel.
Yeah, no, thank you, John. I've been sort of wondering this, the same things myself, really. Yeah, so I'm here representing Chalcombe Parish, and as you may know, it's quite a small parish. We've got around 400 residents, and it's different too in that it's quite, disparate communities, basically hamlets and areas that are quite closely connected to Bath. So I have been advertising, I have to say. I have advertised on our website, on our notice boards, on, at our annual public meeting. So the word has gone out, and unfortunately we haven't had, really any response back. And I've been wondering that, myself, how to sort of move forward with it. And one of our challenges perhaps is, in Charlcombe Parish's case, maybe it's the proximity to Bath. So I do know some people who are involved who would simply join, Transition Bath, let's say. So there is a little bit of an overlap that way. But, I think that your idea of perhaps sharing things that are already going on, maybe that's a worthwhile way forward. And I'd certainly support that.
Thank you, Rachel. Doug.
I can't remember the name of it, but there was an initiative where I think it was a pilot that was being done, which gave almost a monthly topic. And that, if you like, provided a bridge for me to talk to Kelston and the people in Kelston about what was the next element of climate change and the initiatives that were potentially around. And I think I'm right in saying that funding stopped and the whole thing came to a sort of crashing end. And therefore, there were no topics to start feeding to people. I think if we had a monthly topic that we could begin to try and get people engaged with through the parishes, then I think that would be a great help.
Thank you, Doug. It's certainly the view that BCNG is not tied to the formal Bathavon Forum meetings. We are actually free to go our own way, to set up our own meetings and to run as is needed to be run, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'll take forward that idea in the absence of any nays. I take that as a positive. Thank you.
John, can I?
Please do.
I had a couple of thoughts. One is I don't know.
Sorry, I missed your hand.
Sarah, yeah. I don't know whether you are in touch with Grow Bath Eastern as well as Bath Eastern Parish Council, but I think the Parish Council are often quite stretched, and Grow Bath Eastern is very active in this area, so it's worth inviting them to engage with you. And they are taking lots of initiatives in this area. And another thought I had, and I don't know how well it will work, but depending on how sort of busy people are already doing things in their own patches, but there are parishes in other forums who have sort of I know people, parishes within Bathavon have done some great initiatives and could share them, but there might be, for example, I'm just thinking of some of the Chew Valley parishes are very proactive, so you could team up with them for virtual meetings or do swap ideas, that kind of thing. It's just thought.
A very fine thought, Sarah. Thank you. Grow Bath Eastern are actually heavily involved in the steering group, so that they're well aware of what's going on. Yes, but Bath Eastern do have one or two problems, and I think Grow Bath Eastern are doing a tremendous job. It's how to pull everyone else along. There's certainly the will. Interestingly, I might as well mention this. I did raise this point at the Joint Chairs meeting, and it seems that in the current climate, with everything going on in the world at the moment, there's a kind of a fatigue. So it was very interesting to find that I was not alone in finding, I can't think of any other way of putting it other than saying a lack of engagement, to be brutal. And that's not meant in a negative way, it's just fact. Okay, thank you very much for that, Sarah, that's helpful. Okay. Moving forwards, Ukrainian refugee update. Dave Dixon. over to you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Mark, can you put up the little, it's only a very short presentation, it's only 4 slides. Yes, Homes for Ukraine, which we started probably, oh gosh, about 6 or 7 weeks ago now, maybe a bit longer. So basically, just very quickly, there are 2 schemes in operation currently across the country. One is the Ukraine Family Visa Scheme, where you've got Ukrainian people that are living in Bath and North East Somerset who get to invite their family, or their family come across and stay with them, which we don't have much to do with that, and that tends to be services itself. And the one that we are involved with as a local authority is the Homes for Ukraine sponsorship scheme. Now, obviously, individuals and families arriving under these schemes are free to live, work and access public services and benefits while they are here. They find each other, as I'm sure you're aware, by social media. They just literally match up with each other, and they engage in conversations, build a relationship, and then they offer properties and so forth. And the Ukrainians come across, and then what we do then is do all the necessary work around some of that, which is things like the DBS checks and the welfare visits, and supporting them whilst they are here to access a whole bunch of different services. So as you can see, the Baines figures to date, we've got 134 sponsors, and we've got over 300 guests that have now been matched. They're not all of them necessarily have got here yet, because people are arriving as we speak. We had some people that arrived yesterday. We've got 134 sponsors. What we had quite remarkably across Bath and North East Somerset was well over 1,000 people put their properties forward. So we've managed to match 13% of the properties that have come forward, and a lot of that I think is down to either the communications breakdown between the sponsors and the guests coming across, and some of it is to do with the obtaining visas from the Home Office and how quickly they can be obtained and how quickly they can get here. So we've got 83 sponsored homes that have received guests so far, and which is 179 guests, 71 children and young people. And they are, in the vast majority, they are female, children and older people. There are one or two male within the 18 to 60 population age bracket, but they've tended to come across because they will have quite significant underlying health conditions, which means they're not going to be able to they're not going to be able to fight in Ukraine. So can I have the next slide then, please, Mark? So there are a whole series of pre and post arrival checks. We visit the accommodation to check it's suitable for the proposed guests. And also one of the checks is to make sure that the property actually exists, because unfortunately in some occasions across the country, these properties don't actually exist and people are just literally trying it on. We undertake DBS checks on sponsors and all of those aged 16 or above in the household. And again, we've got a team of people that are doing that at the moment within the council. And then after arrival, we do the safeguarding checks, which actually means visiting the guests in their accommodation to make sure that there are no serious concerns. Now, each individual visit takes, depending on geography, depends on where they actually are in Bath and North East Somerset, because we're all based at Peasdown at the Community Wellbeing Hub at the moment. It usually takes about half an hour, 3/4 an hour to prepare the notes. It probably takes an hour and a half, 2 hours to do the actual visit. Traveling time is probably another hour on top. So it's probably 4 hours per each visit. So, and we go in pairs. We mostly go in twos, partly because we're going to accommodation that we're not necessarily have been to before. And also because, to be perfectly honest, on some occasions, the visits are very emotionally demanding and difficult. Lots of people that we are meeting are traumatized, obviously. So ongoing support that we provide as a local authority with our partners, help the guests and sponsors access services. So GPs, schools, get them to apply for universal credit, get them to get a national health service insurance number, We help with accommodation issues, and then we also look at the safeguarding issues that take place as well. We do have a small number of people that have come across as part of the scheme and have gone back to Ukraine, only literally 2 or 3 of them, but that was because they've left family and dependents and elderly relatives and mums and dads and husbands and fathers and sons back in Ukraine, and they've just gone back to be with them as the situation calmed down a little bit, especially in the west of the country. And we have had, up to now, we've had 4 individuals where the relationship between the Ukrainian guest and the sponsor has broken down. And so we've had to take them out of their initial host family or host property and put them into another one, which, as you can appreciate, tends to happen quite quickly and tends to be quite urgent. And that's put quite significant stress and pressure on some of the team that are having to deliver some of that in a very short space of time. So on arrival, a guest gets £200, each individual guest. So irrespective of whether you're 3 or 4 years old or whether you're a mother or whatever, each individual one gets £200, and the sponsors get a £350 a month thank you payment, which is paid in arrears once the accommodation checks have been completed. And the next slide, please, Mark. So we can't do it all on our own as a council, and again, we're using just the benefit of the community wellbeing hub at Peasdown, where we've been since March 2020, and obviously for the first 18 months, 20 months, we were dealing with COVID and all things to do with the pandemic. Now we've been able to put some of that, those facilities and those staff into doing the Ukrainian thing, and we've learned an awful lot of lessons in the last 2 years, and that means we've been able to swing into action really quite quickly. So we're using the council, HCRG Care Group, and some of our partners. There's about 8 or 9 people on the team, including one of Denise Perrin, who I think might be here. I'm not sure. I can't see if she's on the screen. Who's from the Village Agents, and again, that's another organisation that we've been working with very closely, and they've been brilliant in supporting us. So we look to do the welfare visits as soon as reasonably possible. We signpost them to all the health services, schools, emotional health and wellbeing and organisations such as Bath Welcomes Refugees. And again, because of the hub and because of our links and the fact that we're working very closely with the Citizens Advice Bureau, with Bath Mind, with DHI, with lots of different organisations. If there are issues that come up around mental health or counselling and support or around school issues, then we've got everybody that we need very close by with us in the building, and we can signpost them to those activities. So we're about halfway through at the moment. And by the time we get to the end, we're going to need to go back and revisit, because the government wants us to visit the families every couple of months or so. And I think, is that the last slide? There we are. There. So basically, here we are, the Community Wellbeing Hub. It's still the same number as it has been for 26 months. Offer support to any Ukrainian guest. We're commissioning Bath Welcomes Refugees and the other organisations to provide the support. We're doing hosting events for sponsors and guests, and those are gone down very well. We've got a dedicated newsletter that goes out once a week to all the sponsors and all the Ukrainian guests that are here. And then we're just in the process of putting together a grant scheme for local groups and organisations to be able to support our Ukrainian people. And the one big issue, which in North East Somerset, I'm sure you'll be aware of, the big issue that we're finding with them is lack of affordable transport. They want to work, they want their kids to go to school, they want to be involved in the local community, but our transport provision is quite difficult in some of the areas where we've got guests at the moment. So unless Denise is here, because I know she was coming, but Denise, I don't know if you want to say anything else. Have I missed anything out?
You've covered most of the bases. All I just wanted to say is, yes, they're definitely not financial migrants. Everybody that we have met definitely wants to work, even if that's for a short period of time. They are eligible for universal credit, which they're not really used to. So they said, well, is it a loan? We said, no, this is to help you through. The hosts have been incredible. They have been incredible. I don't think that some of them knew quite what they signed up for. Obviously, they're offering free accommodation, or mostly free accommodation. And often that's shared accommodation. So obviously for some that's a lifestyle change as well, like bringing all your teenage kids back home. Anyway, so for some it's a bit of a challenge, but it's working pretty well. But for the first 2 weeks of once people have arrived, most definitely the hosts have got to do a lot of running around. They've got to get GPs. And some have arrived with medical needs, and some have been urgent. One gentleman's ended up in hospital, and another lady had to have an operation. So and mainly because they hadn't been dealing with their medical, well, you can't really deal with your medical issues when you're stuck in a bomb shelter for a month, which some of them have had. So yes, they all want to work as soon as possible. The schools have been amazing at accommodating, because certainly in the Chew Valley area they are at bursting point. But I think this week about 10 Ukrainian children were joining Chew Valley School, something like that. But so there are little clusters. The community response has been rather like COVID, has been amazing in Salford and Keynsham, Chew Valley, and obviously the Bath welcomes refugees as well. In the Chew Valley, I can speak because I'm supporting that group. They've got 5 different coordinators dealing with employment, schooling, health issues, and social issues in transport. So a lot of people have offered free schooling, free school uniforms, free toys. Everyone's offering toys, and it's quite heartwarming. It's quite warming. But as with anything, the honeymoon period for some, in some cases, is wearing off a bit, and of course, suddenly the hosts need to get back on with their day jobs. So that's providing a bit of a strain. And of course, they've all been asked to sign up for the minimum of 6 months, and for some we're already into 3 months. So we have to look at how they move on from there. And fortunately, those that can return home want to and do. But you've seen the pictures of what Ukraine's looking like. We've got one young lady whose university is just a pile of rubble. So she's heartbroken, and her friend who's staying in the same accommodation, her family have all ended up in the Donbas area. So her family are all under Russian occupation now. So yes, we're trying to do whatever support we can. Even with Google Translate, you wouldn't believe how marvellous that is when you need it, even on quite complex subjects. But we're getting by. Just for me to quickly finish, because it is relevant to all of you, the last time I talked to you, we were in the process of recruiting village agents for all of the Bathavon area. All of our village agents are now in post. So I'll get some information to John Adler so that can go out with the package. We're out there working really hard, and just needing your calls now. So we're ready, willing and able. Thanks.
Thanks, Denise. Matt, I think you asked a question about do we know how many guests we've got in Bathavon North, Bathavon South? We do know for both of them put together, because it was done, I think, on the forum areas. I can't remember exactly on the presentation how many it was for Bathavon North and South. They're pretty well spread outside of Bath, and again that causes us some geographical issues. And again, it's the transport issues, where we've got people that are desperate to work, but they're in a tiny little bit hamlet on the outskirts of Chew Valley somewhere, and if they're lucky, there's one bus a day, and that becomes then very frustrating for them, because they want to contribute and support their host family.
I mean, where there are clusters of families, obviously it's working much better. There's no doubt about that, because they've got peer support, they've got WhatsApp, they can help each other. Some of them have managed to borrow cars, some have arrived with cars, and the hosts are lending cars. So that's sort of helping. But my feeling is regarding the rural transport, if we can crack this situation with the Ukrainians, bussing them around in minibuses to get them to job centres and language classes and everything else, that's a damn good model to start taking forward for our rural areas as well. So hopefully we're learning something along the way as well.
I've just had a look at the slide, Dave, and the number's 11 for Bathavon overall.
Right. Okay. And I'm pretty certain, because I've been there, over half of them are in one property. And a very nice property it is. I can't tell you where it is, but it's very nice indeed. In fact, we've been to some very nice locations in North East Somerset. Thank you, John. Unless anybody else has got any other questions.
Thank you very much, Dave and Denise. That's really appreciated. Just one final call for questions from anyone. No. Okay. Thank you very much. That's a painful subject, painful topic indeed. Moving forwards on to planning policy. We set up an issues list for issues felt by all the parishes in Bathavon area forum. And the #1 area for issues was planning. The intention of that issues list was to get better engagement between the parish councils and BANES, and to get dialogue going and to find a way of resolving the key issues. Now, you've all seen the issues list that was circulated. Simone de Boer has very kindly come along to provide an overview of the process and to field questions that may arise. To be fair to Simon, I don't think we should expect responses on every single question asked, but we should be able to find a way forwards to exactly how we can resolve the issues in the future. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, John. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Simon de Boer. I'm the head of planning, covering both the development management side and also the planning policy side. I've seen your list of issues, and there's a whole range of issues there, some which I could answer, some which I wouldn't have a clue how to answer without speaking to particular colleagues. And it does cover a range of planning issues. So it covers planning policy, it covers development management, covers enforcement, covers listed buildings. So I'd need to bring a whole series of officers because, as a scientist, in my role as head of service, I'm losing touch with the detail and the processes and the detailed information. So I just wouldn't anymore be able to pick up some of those points. What we're going to do, John, I think is helpful to you, is we're going to take all the planning queries you've got and we're going to do responses to all of those in written responses and give them back to you. And then if any we want to pursue at a subsequent meeting, we're quite happy to do that, bearing in mind that quite often they get down to, or they arise because it's a particular case. And a particular case, whilst there may be a wider interest to some, generally they're very boring to people because they're about a particular case. So, you know, we need to be a little bit careful about how we take things forward. I'm also a little bit concerned about we don't start going into a live planning application case when there's a process for dealing with that. But generally, if we can deal with all your issues log in that way, and we're quite happy, and I really see the benefits of responding to your concerns and seeing we can do things differently, because quite often we do review our process or the way we do things, and things come to light, and so we're happy to change it. But the request I've had in front of me today was just to run through at a very high level some of the planning policy situation, planning policies we're at. So I'm happy to do that. I'm going to bore you potentially with 4 more slides. I'm quite happy not to show you the slides. So I'm sure you have got slide fatigue. If you don't want to, then just put your hand up and say, no more slides, please. I'll just talk to them. Otherwise, I don't know, Mark, whether you've got the slides, or shall I share them myself? Any great resistance?
I'm happy to share them for you. I'll just put them up on the screen now. Okay.
Thank you. So if you just jump to the next slide. Oh, that was quick.
Start again. There we go. Go on.
So we just jump to the second slide. That was just the title slide. So as my colleague Louise explained, and you probably all know this, we're currently doing an interim update of the current planning policies, primarily driven by our concerns and the council's concerns and our members' concerns about being able to respond properly and make good decisions in response to the climate emergency and the ecological emergency. So our local plan was adopted in 2014. just really not robust enough to make the kind of decisions we need at development management, and doesn't set out the right kind of objectives. So we've been revising the policies. Some of those policies also relate to the need to replenish housing land supply. It doesn't really affect, I don't think, the parishes in the Bathavon forum, although there may be indirect implications, because you can't divide these things off, and what happens in one part of the district has knock-on implications. So we've been, over the last year or so, we've been updating the policies, and it always does take some time, I'm afraid, in the planning process. We're subject to the process set done by government, so it doesn't move as quickly as we like, although the partial update has happened much more quickly than a full update a full plan review would take place. We're now to the examination. I don't know if any of you have tuned in or even been to the hearings to see what's going on, and we've had 2 days of it now. It'll be for this week, and then there's a break, and then there's a week in July. So it's fairly contained, being a partial update. We haven't got it yet onto the renewable energy issues, but I think some of the points I've pulled out, which you may find more interesting in relation to the Bathavon parishes, are things like the redefinition of infill boundaries and what an infill boundary is, as opposed to the old housing development boundaries. Ways we can seek to facilitate generation of renewable energy. The way we transforming the park and ride sites to interchanges, moving away from the traditional role they played of place. We just come and park a car and get a bus into Bath, but they can look outward, and they also provide a place for cycle focus and other recreational uses. Number of development sites in and around Bath. So, for instance, at the university, those are being reviewed in terms of the site requirements. There's also a neighbourhood plan housing requirements, which government requires us to be clear about what all the neighbourhood plan areas need to deliver. That's fairly straightforward, because we're just reflecting what you've really committed, and I don't think there's much really in the Bathavon parishes. We're also changing the policies around construction and energy efficiency, and then trying to bring forward the government's initiatives for biodiversity net gain. So the 10% we're bringing forward in the local plan and ahead of the national requirement. Next slide, please, Mark. Alongside and supporting the new local, so the partial update, we're revamping and revising and introducing a new set of supplementary planning documents, and these are supported because they allow us to have more flexibility in terms of content and preparation. And there's a number there, I won't go through each of those, because a number of them are listed. Again, what we're doing is focusing more on responding to the climate emergency and the ecological emergency. There's a number there, I think you'll be familiar with most of those. Some of those are new, some of those are just about to begin, some of those have just recently been adopted, and some are just, I think, just finished consultation. Just making sure that we've got a full range of necessary policies to respond to the kind of issues which are important to us at the moment. Next slide, please, Mark. I thought I'd better mention the WECA Spatial Development Strategy. Those of you who are not familiar, it's the requirement on the WECA Mayor to produce a sub-regional spatial strategy setting out the broad planning framework for the WECA area. It'll set out the key policies, a number of a few key policies, and also highlight the locations for growth, so for future long-term growth. That's the role of the spatial development strategy. It was due to be published a month or so ago, spring, early summer. It hasn't been, because the WECA Mayor's halted work on the plan because there wasn't agreement in terms of the housing requirement for each of the authorities and for the sub-region. And so he's written to the Secretary of State advising that he's halted work, and we're all waiting for a response from the Secretary of State. But all the UAs are continuing with the new local plans anyway, so we're not going to allow it to delay us, because we all need clarity on terms of what the planning frameworks are. And in Baines, in addition, we're coming to a conclusion on our local plan partial updates. We've got the extra benefit of bringing in some of the policies early. We would have to wait until the new local plan for the full set of policy review. Having said that, Mark, the next slide, please. This big initiative, and it's a bit like painting the fourth bridge, is the full local plan, the full review of the local plan. So as I said before, the last local plan was adopted in 2014. We've done a bridging exercise with a partial update to address just those key policies that need to be amended as a matter of urgency. But the whole planning framework does need to be amended, covering all the issues and starting afresh, really, to make sure that the council's planning framework is fit for purpose and does address the issues we want them to address in the way we want them to be addressed. So we anticipate launching that new work in September, so after the LPPU examinations. It's scheduled to be adopted in 24-25. It does take a while because of the process we need to go through, but we are very keen to work with local communities on those that affect them. So part of the place approach, which Louise was talking about earlier on, we're going to use that alongside other initiatives. So there may be more bespoke requirements to work more closely with you. And for the first local plan, for the alcohol strategies, we may recollect that we did work closely with you in terms of defining housing development boundaries, in terms of doing local assessments. So we want to begin that conversation so that the new local plan really is something that you've had a significant role in, and you won't always like some of the issues coming out. Quite often in planning, we can never please, we'll always upset somebody by saying yes or no. So we always cause consternation and upset, but at least if we can work with you and you can make sure that whatever happens, you get the best outcome for your community in light of the circumstances. And just a reminder there that the government continually changes the planning system. There's a whole tranche of new proposals in the Levelling Up Bill, which will affect that. And so we're aware of those, we'll have to feed those in. So I think I didn't want to spend too long talking about policy. You can close this presentation, Mark. It's really if you've got any questions around planning policy. If I can't answer them, and some I may struggle to answer because I don't have that knowledge as I used to, being the head of service, I'll answer those, or I'll take away with me any questions and come back to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. That's much appreciated. Doug.
I find it very difficult to get any traction at all from the planning department. In the various areas that I operate in, we have invited an officer to come to discuss not specific issues, but to discuss process, so that everybody can engage and support the planning department as much as to support their local area. I have to say that we have not even had the courtesy of a response, never mind being told that somebody can't come. So if you want people to work with you, Simon, everybody certainly that I'm involved with, either in Kelston Parish or in the Preservation Trust, has put out an olive branch and said, we'd want to work with you, but you've not responded in any way, shape or form. So please, we'd like to get some traction with regard to particularly enforcement issues. But just that in terms of process, I would like to offer you the opportunity to come to either a Kelston Parish meeting and or a Preservation Environs Group meeting to come and talk about process and how we can work together.
Doug, I'm very happy to do that. I haven't had any requests that I'm aware of from Kelston or any to have a conversation. The only request I'm aware of is what's come through from John in terms of a number of your issues log. So I do apologise if something's gone lost in the system somewhere, but I'm just not aware of any to me or the managers. So we're happy to take that invitation up. As I said, I don't know what's happened there in terms of the invitation. I don't know who it went to.
Well, no names, no pack drill. My local councillor either wrote to you and it was passed down to the head of enforcement who didn't respond. So there's no need to go into any detail.
No, I just need to say something about the enforcement team and that they are going through a very difficult period in terms of workload turnover, and they're down back to half strength team. So not making an excuse, but just be aware that that particular team is under considerable pressure and they are struggling to get through the workload. I'm doing what I can to bring that back up to strength and perhaps even make it stronger. But there are particular issues in the enforcement team. You won't believe the amount of work that poor team's got to deal with.
I do believe and I do understand. I also know that that's been going on for some considerable time. Thank goodness I don't work for the local council, because I would be looking to divert some resource to having people on the ground who can satisfy local communities rather than necessarily going forward with clean air projects, although those are also equally important. But if we could communicate with each other, I'd be delighted if somebody could come along.
Very happy to do so, Doug.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pat.
Well, I'd just like to add a bit to that, to say that we did ask Mr. De Beer to come to Wellow Parish Council meeting, and that was declined. And enforcement, I understand they have a lot of problems, and I have a lot of sympathy for the officers working there. But we raised a matter back in February, and it was looked at last week. I don't know what the problem is. I expect you'll say there's no money, but you know, it continually sends out the wrong messages to people that they can do more or less what they like, because the chances of actually having any comeback are pretty remote at the moment. And I think that's a terrible situation.
Thanks, Pat. Just to repeat what I said before, and that the enforcement team really are struggling to get through all the workloads. They have to prioritise issues where there's perhaps danger to property or falling trees, those kind of issues. Now they are working through all of the issues referred to them, but it's taking them a long time, because I said, because as soon as I appoint somebody in the enforcement team, they leave. It's such turnover, and they just can't keep the team up to strength. So I mean, it sounds like it's a bit of an excuse, but that's the reality. They just can't get to the issues quickly enough. I apologise if I missed if I declined. I don't recollect the Wellow invitation to Wellow Parish Council meeting, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe I was on leave.
We'll send another one.
Fine, I'm happy to. I really think it's important to be. I mean, I've got a huge benefit from my past work in working with the parishes. You learn so much from parishes, and you get an aspect which you don't normally get from other angles. So actually speaking to the parishes directly really is very beneficial. I find it very beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any other questions? No? Okay.
Well, actually, I do have one. Sorry, guys. I would be very grateful, and perhaps not now, but for some clarification on the barn conversion under Class Q, because it seems to be a bit contradictory, some of the information we get, and it seems some barns go ahead with this under this class and convert barns to houses, and others are turned down under the ruling by, who is it, Hibbert. And I mean, I'm happy to write to planning and get some, say, clarification on this, but you know, on the one hand, in a planning application form, certain works are necessary, which include replacement of windows, doors, roofs and exterior walls, the installation of drainage, etc., part demolition. And yet, on the other hand, some planning applications are turned down because it amounts to a rebuild rather than a conversion. And I would be very interested to know when does a conversion become a rebuild?
John, can we add that to the list of the issues log? We're going to be responding to all the points, the planning points on the issues log. And
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Pat, if you could email through your wording to me, that'd be much appreciated.
Okay, I'll do that, because it's not just our parish it affects. I would imagine it covers all the rural ones. So I'll do that. Thank you.
It certainly does. I mean, one of the things I'm hearing most from people in Freshford is, can we please have consistency across the different planning officers on the interpretation of things that have got a subjective element.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And any other points to raise? So thank you very, very much.
Can I just,
Stephen,
building up what people have said, and it's not an issue. I think that what we're missing is an expression of the strategic intent. It's that overarching way forward in which individual decisions are taken that is unclear. It's the lack of consistency that Pat's referred to. It's other areas. Simon has just explained, and some of the issues coming up for the local plan and the new local plan will set out the way forward. But I think that as much as responding to individual questions, more regular and clearer as I say, strategic intent. What is it that the department or the council as a whole is looking at as good for this parish or that parish or that general area? It's the bittiness of the individual applications, which I agree, get down into the detail. What I look for sometimes, certainly for our rural parish and all around, is the overarching strategy in which the development of the village, the development of the parish is taking place. And I think that that would be helpful every now and again. It's not a matter of responding to an individual question. It's more of this point about setting out the Baines stall, the planning department stall, so that we can understand where things should be going within it.
That's quite an interesting point you're making there, and something to ponder. So what you're talking about, so what we do have in terms of the local plan and some of the planning documents, that does set out spatially, geographically, and by topic what the council's objectives are and how those apply across the district. There are different levels of detail. So in terms of what we're seeking to achieve and the policies to be applied, those are all set on the local plan. But it sounds like, are you talking about something further to that, Steve? I haven't quite my head around what you're asking for in terms of that strategic intent outside of what's existing in the local plan.
Well, no, I take it that the local plan sets out the individual elements, but I don't see, as obviously you do, the clarity of the direction that overarching it's giving. Now, you're right. With in September this year, if you're setting out the consultation, then that will be the way where I could project my queries and take them forward. But from where I'm sitting at the moment, and underneath that, the issues that come up and are addressed at the single application level, I am not seeing that the local plan covers the way forward for the rural area. That perhaps I'm missing the overarching steer, but I think that there is a kind of lacuna in the way that, as I say, the rural areas of Bath are given that direction. What is the way forward on the development of the farming economy around here, which is important in the way that this parish and the village and the hamlets develop? I'm not seeing that that's in the local plan as being as explicit as it may be.
That's a very interesting steer there, and that's something I think we should be able to we should think about a bit further. So I think you put your finger on something there, which perhaps does need a bit of somewhere within the local plan process and associated service work does need some kind of addressing. So I think that is right. And it sounds like what you're talking about also is beyond just planning. So obviously agriculture is outside the planning system. So we don't have any planning policies covering planning, because why would we? We don't have any control. So it sounds like we need to be taking a slightly different view in terms of seeing how the planning policies fit alongside other approaches the council's taking for particularly the rural areas, where a lot of it's greenbelt anyway, and that almost sets a very high level policy, but you lose a lot then in terms of the detail because some of the underlying stuff. I think to also talk about is the role for neighbourhood plans, which you're in the driving seat of, and there's a scope for some parishes have the resource and time. Not all do. I do appreciate it's quite an arduous task for some. But that, in terms of some of the planning policies, those do play a role to fill some of that gap as well. So I think there's a conversation there around the scope of the local plan, around the role potentially for neighbourhood plans, and the new planning reform is bringing in the opportunity for you to set out your neighbourhood priorities for us to reflect in the local plan, and then how that fits in with some of the wider work, which perhaps I think Louise is doing in terms of the green infrastructure work. So it's a bit of joining together there, I think, in terms of how we all work together to make sure we have covered anything where there are gaps.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. In just one question, in taking forwards the written responses, would it help if we were to identify a top 3, a top 5?
really appreciate prioritising because, as I said before, you know, we are quite busy at the moment, and I don't want to make excuses, but we are very, very busy. Workloads are high, and if you can give us your priorities in terms of what you wanted to respond to, we can perhaps get around to those more quickly and give you those, and then get to a second tranche.
That's fine. We've got, from my thinking, 8 PCs on the call. We can either call in a top 3 now, or we can take it offline. But I'm concerned about taking it offline, that it'll go down the hole. I'm also concerned about taking up everyone's time now, because we haven't set up a poll to do a quick vote.
People have it in the chat, John.
Louise.
Sorry, I've lost the function button to put my hand up. So this is actually a real hand.
I did see your hand go up.
Yeah.
It's not yellow.
Yeah. So John, thank you for just raising that point about prioritisation. So I think this, for me, in trying to sort of develop my role, if I can understand priorities, and they might not all be very neatly planning related, they might be to do with economic strategy, or they might be to do with transport or tourism, but it can help me understand how we can best approach those issues, especially if they're sort of complex and cutting across bureaucratic silos, which make all about so if you can do that, that's appreciated, but understand if it's not possible to do that now. Thanks, John.
I think it's totally valid to take a look at each section, what are the top 3 in each section, but then what are the overall? I'm just concerned about, if I'm honest, about time doing them all now as well as planning. That's all. For those PCs who are on, do you have the issues list up that was emailed out? Available? No?
John, I don't have the issues list. Would it be simpler to set up a poll that we could do offline, say within the next 24 hours, and then you'll have an issues priority list?
I'm certainly comfortable in doing that. Doug, if you could let me have your email address, please, that'd be fantastic. That would help. And then I'll set up an outside poll and come back to you, Simone and Louise, very, very shortly with both sets of priorities.
So just to confirm, we are happy to answer all the questions. Just if you want to give us a priority, which ones you want answered first.
Absolutely.
It's a matter of prioritising you're talking about. We will work our way through the list, and hopefully, you know, before the next meeting, have given you a response to all of those.
No, that is certainly appreciated, Simone. And there's no suggestion that you weren't looking to answer them. Just trying to help the process along. There's certainly a question I'd like to put on that isn't on the list, but I'll wait and see what the planning committee's response is. I don't think it's fair to put live cases to you. As tempting as that may be.
I'm happy to pick that up offline. If you've got a particular case, I feel we can do to, if there's anything I can respond to, or the case officer can speak to you about that. But
we've been talking. I won't take it up here. It's not a forum matter. Okay. With that, the question we've got is moving on to the next topic. Thank you very much, Simone. Your input there is really, really appreciated. I appreciate your time is precious, but I do feel this interaction, and I know it's early days in working this way, but I think it's valuable and sends a really important message. Your time is so appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to go and grab a drink or some food, please feel free.
Can I just say that we will be, and I think it's on your forward plan, we will be coming to you in more detail about the new local plan and having a conversation. We'll set out to the launch a whole series over the next year of how we're going to be engaging with local communities on the new local plan. So that's forthcoming.
That would be fantastic, because one of the questions I was going to raise was whether the forums can't actually provide a basis for engagement from the different areas, such as planning, and so you can actually engage directly with the parish councils. It's a thought. However, I'm not clear on what discussions have been had elsewhere. I'm probably speaking out of turn. I'm probably speaking from lack of knowledge, but it just seemed a sensible thing to raise.
Just to say to that, we do find generally the forums are very helpful vehicle for us to be doing these conversations. There are some things which do need to have a one-to-one conversation or a cluster of particular parishes, and that depending on the issue, but quite often in planning, when it gets down to neighbourhood planning issues or housing development boundary type issues, those need to be on a more specific one-to-one basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the last topic, looking forwards, how should we take the forum meetings forwards? They're planned ostensibly for 4 meetings a year. We've already broken out with the BCNG, and we're looking to hold those meetings with far more regularity. Let's assume it does get up and running, because I hope it will. I'd be surprised if we're not looking at monthly. The question is, what do people feel the next forum meetings should entail? Because they should be parish council driven. And I'll lay that open to the floor to give suggestions. The reason I'm doing that is I don't feel it's right that I should dictate.
Dave's got his hand up. Dave Orme.
Dave.
Yeah, thanks, John. Speaking for Dugston and Tunley Parish Council, sorry, the screen's frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very clearly.
Speaking for Dugston and Tunley Parish Council, we're very keen to see the forum meetings now return to face-to-face, in person, 4 times a year, ostensibly the way things used to work, so that the place and importance of the forum meetings becomes as apparent as it used to. Zoom meetings, we feel, had their time and place when there was no other way to do business. But the immediacy and dynamism and environment of a physical meeting, we believe, cannot be bettered in terms of interaction and communication and signalling to the world how important the meeting is. As an example tonight, I don't know which parish councils are here and which ones aren't, because I don't recognise names and faces on a little screen. Whereas we can talk over cups of coffee in margins, you can do all the good things that humans do. So we think it's time to go back to physical meetings so that the forum's place is properly signalled to the parish councils, and parish councils' attendance or absence becomes properly apparent. You're muted, John, sorry.
Thank you, Dave. I hear what you're saying, Robert.
Well, and if we had all been in one room tonight, we could have prioritised the issues list through a post-it note exercise. But we can't.
Okay. Robert.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I'd concur with David on meeting together. And although the COVID hasn't exactly passed, I think it'd be very much better and beneficial. The other thing is, obviously we've spoken with Simon a lot about planning, and those, of course, when I with my own parishioners, that's what comes out, that's what gets them aggravated, and the lack of I don't know, continuity or understanding of certain aspects, and I'm finding it increasingly difficult to justify the parish council's position at a meeting when it'll be overturned, or something from Baines Planning will say something different. Not a good look. And I understand exactly what Simon says about the difficulty of time-wise of getting planning officers to parish councils, and they can't obviously be involved on site with parish council on every issue, on every planning issue. So the strategy is very important, what we need to know. But that's already all I could say. Their strategy, I think, in future meetings to get some kind of feel of how much time should be spent on each subject. People have their own views, but my obviously one would be planning. That's all.
Thank you. I take what you say, Dave. I'm not sure we both totally agree on the reasoning, but I do agree that face-to-face meetings have their place, and we have been apart for too long. I feel the climate meeting we're setting up needs to be face-to-face, because we need that off-subject peripheral discussions, and I think today may well have benefited from that. I think the negative side to it is it means we all have to travel, which is not helpful towards carbon emissions, and may have been part of the reason for the original Bathavon Forum splitting in two, because the amount of travel involved.
If we're only doing it 4 times a year, if it's not important enough to travel 4 times a year, what's the point at all?
Why are we here anyway?
Why are we here anyway?
Yeah,
It's a signal to the world how important the meeting is.
I think if we were to take a location that's in Bath rather than out in the parishes, then that gives a fair travel distance for one and all. If we were to have specific meetings, I would take you back to the clean air meeting that we had. I think it was in Preston, which was one hell of a meeting. We need to think about it on a meeting by meeting basis, because the question is, should we have 4 meetings a year, or should we have more? I leave that as an open question. Doug.
Within the Preservation Trust, we've agreed going forward that we will have alternate meetings in person, and we meet bi-monthly in the Environs group. So alternate meetings will be Zoom and in person. And I think because of the complexity of trying to get into Bath, trying to park, and the cost of travel and parking, that we will do our in-person meeting in the parish. And I think that covers a lot of ground, really. And we'll rotate it so that we go to different parishes so that we include everybody.
Thank you. To be fair, I have done a bit of prep on this, and one of the suggestions that's been made is that we could use the rooms up at the old Fox Hill location, where there's parking. Parking's not an issue. It's a good facility, and we can actually have teas and coffees there. So I thought, Sarah, sorry I missed you.
Hello. It was just to say, well, obviously I can see there are some real benefits to meeting in person sometimes. I suppose I'll just put another factor that hasn't been mentioned is for those people with caring responsibilities for children or for other people, it is, of course, much easier to join from your spare bedroom on Zoom than it is to get in a car and drive halfway across the county. So I completely appreciate there are big advantages in some ways to meeting in person. In some other groups, committees and things that I'm on, we've been discussing whether we might have a balance of sometimes meeting in person and sometimes meeting over Zoom, because there are also people out there still who are nervous of getting into a room with a lot of other people because they're still feeling anxious about COVID. So I don't know that there's any right or wrong, and I can see pluses and minuses both ways, but just to put out that point of view.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a very good point about carers. Okay, is there anyone here who could not have joined this meeting if it was in person in Bath?
Don't say I wouldn't have, but I would have been less likely to.
Thank you. Louise. Rachel. So that's 3. And anyone else? No.
So John, just to add to that.
Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, John. So it's just a unique set of circumstances today because my husband had to travel to do something. But one thing that we do at work now is hybrid meetings, which does require a bit of IT savviness. But we have ended up with this wonderful, rich meetings where you have people there in person, and personally that's me. I want to be there in person as much as I can because you get so much more, seeing the intrinsic value of just those conversations in the sidelines, so important, but also people aren't excluded, and it does work really well, but it just takes a little bit more planning.
It does, and I'm used to those. I use those commercially before lockdown, and I found them incredibly useful. I suppose my question then is, and I'm not sure we can have an answer now, is that a technology that's possibly available to this forum? And if so, where?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable challenge back to us and the community engagement team to give it a go for the next one. If you want that, if people want to try that, then maybe that is a challenge for us to try and make that work. But let us know. Yeah.
I think on the best we would have would be you would have a computer in a room where those additional people who are joining online would join the meeting. So the hybrid solution is great when you're in an office which has got all the equipment. Not so great if you're out and about somewhere which hasn't got particularly great broadband, or you've got people who don't quite realize what they're going to see and hear in terms of their part within the meeting. So I guess we can have a little play with it and trial it and see what we can do, and it can certainly be an offering to people, but there might be a little bit of trial and error to start with, I think.
Manage expectations, but let's give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And apologies, I do fully accept, Sarah, that my question on who couldn't was snap and unfair, but it gave a view. Doug.
Everybody would be very welcome to come to Kelston. We have our own true speed, super fast broadband, which goes everywhere in the country and beyond. So you're very welcome to come to Kelston.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic.
When are we getting true speed? Anyway, I won't go there. Thank you. So, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. The time is 7:30. Actually, the planned end time. We're actually ending exactly on time.
Oh, no. Good.